Where, oh, where is Brandon Aiyuk headed? Welcome to the Locked On NFL podcast.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, football fans? Welcome to the Locked On NFL podcast, your daily spot for all things NFL. It's Tuesday. That means you get me. I am Luke Braun at Luke Braun NFL, here with Louis DiBiase of Locked On Eagles. Second week in a row that I've spoken with a host of Locked On Eagles. I get the other one today. Hello, Louis. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out. Thank you to all of you for hanging out. All of our hashtag everydayers. Appreciate you all so very much. Today's episode of Locked On NFL is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today on the show, the Brandon Aiyuk trade sweepstakes is heating up. There's a decent chance that by the time you listen to this, you already know the answer to this, but the rumor mill is crazy. So we're going to break it down for you. And then when the news actually breaks, you'll be all set up with all the context that you need. Plus, this is kind of a weird moment for the 49ers. So we'll maybe take stock of where they are at, as well as our yike and like of the week, as we do every Tuesday here on Locked On NFL. So first things first, Louis, I'll give you the lowdown on where we've heard things about Brandon Aiyuk. It seems like a trade is imminent. It seems like things between him and the 49ers have broken down entirely, and now it's a matter of who pays what for him and who gives him the contract that he wants. And it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of where. The candidates that Tom Pelissero went on NFL Network, he said that the Browns are a big candidate and the Patriots are a big candidate. And then you have this Steelers thing. So for those who are not on Twitter all the time and online poisoned, first off, congratulations. Second off, there is this Twitter account called Pretty Ricky that is, I'm going to say, a leaker, as he has had a lot of moments of leaking real news well before it would be feasible to know that, and having enough details to like prove that there is some legitimacy there, but it's still, it's not clear who this person is. Their real name isn't on the account. So it isn't the air of legitimacy that we usually get from news people, to the point where even Tom Pelissero is, calling him a Twitter account that bought a blue check and thinks he's a reporter or whatever, but he's saying Steelers. And that person has been right a whole bunch. This phenomenon of this guy that I'm going to guess works for an agency or something, leaking all of this information all the time and scooping all of the established insiders, the Rappaports, the Schefters and stuff, to me is absolutely hilarious. Let them fight. But also, I do think that person has been right often enough to make us take the Steelers seriously as at least a destination. And we'll see. We got a source off. Everybody's mad about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Pittsburgh has been a team that's been brought up the majority of the time that these Aiyuk trade rumors have been circulating. But Luke, my biggest takeaway from all of this still remains not where Aiyuk is going to go, whether it is Cleveland, New England, Pittsburgh, Buffalo. I mean, name the candidates that could want this stud
Buffalo
young
would be
receiver.
something.
Buffalo would make a ton of sense. Why San Francisco is looking to trade him, and I get it from a contract perspective, but why this team would not be willing to extend Brandon Aiyuk makes very little sense to me for a team that's in a win now mode. He is an elite young receiver that I would absolutely want to pay. And if it's, we already paid George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, Brock Purdy's contract coming up. I cover the Philadelphia Eagles. They had no issues doing it for A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley. It looks like other teams don't really have issues with that either. San Francisco, it feels like a very weird situation that they're so bullish on these negotiations. Unless he wants like top 3 receiver money, I'm not sure where this massive disconnect is, where now a trade is imminent.
Something has gone wrong, I think, in the contract negotiation there. Apparently. The 49ers didn't want to come up to what Aiyuk did. And the thing is, if there's all these suitors too, that tells you that other teams were. So I don't know. Yeah, I have been harping that same point for weeks here. This whole on Locked On NFL, as this whole thing has played out, going 49ers. Oh my God, just keep the dude. He's a stud. And you need a stud. Deebo Samuel wasn't healthy last year. George Kittle missed I think he missed. He was banged up for sure. Christian McCaffrey, very extensive injury history. You need somebody that you can rely on like Aiyuk, and he finally took a step forward last year beyond what he had done before. I think last year was really something special for him. And we'll talk more about where that leaves the 49ers and perhaps an awkward spot. But here's the question. If you are the world's biggest Brandon Aiyuk fan, where would you be rooting for him to go? What do you think the best destination for him is?
I honestly am surprised at the three teams we're hearing right now that are most likely, and it's early on right now, but Cleveland, New England, and Pittsburgh. Like, I understand Pittsburgh is a playoff team that needs a receiver to complement George Pickens. The Cleveland Browns are a loaded roster that are trying to make the most of Deshaun Watson and get him back to who he was in Houston. But I don't know, like to me, Luke, if I'm picking an ideal destination, it would be the Buffalo Bills. It just makes far too much sense. A team that's been knocking on the door for years, just can't get over the hump against Patrick Mahomes. They lose Stephon Diggs. Yes, you draft Keon Coleman in the second round, but does Josh Allen and that team trust him to be the guy to replace Diggs? Outside of him, it's Khalil Shakir and Curtis Samuel. Like, that's a very, I don't know, C+, B- receiving core. If I were the Buffalo Bills, it makes so much sense for Aiyuk and for the team. That would be the destination that I would pick.
It's interesting looking up the effective cap space currently for 2024. The team that is leading the league in effective cap space is the San Francisco 49ers. They're currently sitting on $52 million in effective cap space that they could just use right now. That's what makes no sense. That's what insane, right? Because they could front load it. Now they actually do have cap problems coming down the road, but they have a lot right now. So I think they're just intending to roll a lot of that over to help deal with some of the other big contracts that are really kicking in. And I guess that's where they're at. But the next richest team right now is the New England Patriots. And I think for Aiyuk, it's a money thing. Who is willing to pay him the most, which for New England, it makes sense. For Pittsburgh, they are going to have they've got a basically clean books for the next 2 years. They've only got 15 mil right now, which is still not for nothing, but the next 2 years, they're top 3 in cap space. So they have the money coming up in the future. The one that doesn't make sense to me is the Browns with the Deshaun Watson contract and all the other money they're throwing around at, like they've thrown around at free agents, like you said, loaded roster and all that. Well. Jerry Jeudy. Yeah. That one is a little bit more difficult to see where the contract really fits in there, which is why part of that rumor, as grain of salt, but as that rumor has swirled around, has maybe Amari Cooper attached to it. So you're getting a contract off the books while you put a new one on it. Maybe that's like part of it. But I think the Steelers and the Patriots, to me, make the most sense as teams that he would instantly be wide receiver one with a bullet. And they both have quarterback situations that are perhaps developing, but there's something to be excited about with, Drake May and okay, here's the guy you can get to know Drake May and develop with him and all that. And it's not there yet, but the rebuild is there. And here's your big contract and you can be a part of this new chapter. Or in Pittsburgh, where suddenly maybe we have something with Justin Fields. We'll get to that in a bit. So I could see that making sense. And of course with Buffalo as well, where they're trying to kind of hold their Super Bowl window open by the skin of their teeth. I could absolutely see that as well, but I believe you still have some of the same cap questions with Buffalo that you have with like moving forward with the Browns and 49ers and et cetera. But all of that is to be determined. We'll see where Brandon, and again, by the time you're listening to this, you might know more than we do. We might have this news, in the morning, right as this episode comes out. So instead, let's talk about the practicalities of what's going on in San Francisco. What is left in San Francisco after Aiyuk leaves, and how seriously are we still taking them as a contender? That'll be next.
Today's episode of the Locked On NFL podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Look, I love sports. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs do wind down, we get fewer games. And the sports, they stop sportsing like we want them to. But FanDuel, they let me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I got to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com, start making the most of your summer, bet on some futures in the NFL, where Brandon Aiyuk is going to show up in the NFL in 2024, all that and more. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
Moving right along here with the Locked On NFL podcast. Thank you so much again for the hashtag everydayers that come around to Locked On NFL every day and either watch or listen to this show every single day. When you're done here, if you're still looking for some football content, Locked On Fantasy Football has you covered. I know your draft's coming up. I know you're looking for an edge. Let Vinny Iyer give it to you. San Francisco is in such a polarized spot. Here's where I'm at on San Francisco. I look at them walking out of a Super Bowl appearance, essentially running the same roster back now, minus Brandon Aiyuk, whatever you think the impact of that is, and with league-leading cap space in this offseason. I kind of thought they would do more. They would do more to keep that core together. And I think we share that critique of John Lynch, but the question now is, are they still, without Aiyuk, is that core of Debo, McCaffrey, Kittle, with Purdy at the helm, enough for us to believe in them as the NFC front-runner team to beat? Or do we start looking to somebody else, like the Lions, or maybe somebody in the NFC East, like Eagles or Cowboys, Eagles on a bounce-back year or something like that? Do we start looking elsewhere for who's going to be that one seed, the road to the Super Bowl goes through here instead of Levi Stadium? What do you think?
Yeah, I think Brandon Aiyuk, if he's on the San Francisco 49ers, they're in a tier of their own. And then it's the Detroit Lions, it's the Philadelphia Eagles, it's, whoever. It's such that conference is up for grabs.
Probably mention the Packers as much as I don't want to.
Yeah, the Packers, the Dallas Cowboys still, if you believe that they'll finally figure out their playoff woes. But overall, it would be the 49ers in a tier of their own. If they do not have Brandon Aiyuk, I think that roster on both sides of the ball for 2024 is still talented enough where they're in the top tier with those other teams. But without him, I don't know if they're in a tier of their own. As you mentioned earlier, like Deebo Samuel has injury issues. Christian McCaffrey has an injury history. Same with George Kittle. Do you trust Brock Purdy? And maybe, in Kyle Shanahan's offense, he'll never have to be the guy that you win because of, but you win more with. But the more you start to lose these players, Luke, the more that's going to be put on the shoulders of that quarterback that we've never really seen have to carry the load. When was the last time we saw a quarterback in Kyle Shanahan's offense that's had to carry it? So if they do lose him, I think for this year, they're still a top tier team, but the come down feels like, I don't know, with them and the Dallas Cowboys, especially, it feels like two of the top teams in the conference are not on the rise, more of the decline, and they have to pay Purdy eventually. I don't know. I think they definitely step back a peg. And I honestly think part of this whole Aiyuk situation for me is it's more of a manifestation of Kyle Shanahan's, I don't want to say ego, but just confidence in his system no matter what. And of course, he has the track record to show, doesn't matter what quarterback or what weapon I have here, I'm going to make it work. But it does feel like sometimes with Shanahan at quarterback, at receiver, not saying they don't value talent. I mean, look at the team they have, but I do think that plays a part of it too, is like, hey, we might be okay without Aiyuk. And because of that mentality, sometimes you're going to lose a lot of talented players.
I think that mentality gets him sometimes. I think that mentality lets somebody like Jimmy Garoppolo walk out the door when you had something okay going on. Now he's old and he's been hurt now, so he's not the Jimmy Garoppolo of 2019, 2020, and you kind of say, we don't really feel the need to reclaim that. We'll just go with this backup guy. And the kind of guy that says, yeah, Trey Lance hasn't played any football, but we can teach him. It's fine. Well, the system will carry it, and then that doesn't work out. And I think the 49ers have hit that, but the future of the 49ers, again, I'm like so polarized on it. I'm so back and forth. The future of the 49ers is in place. They don't really need assets to rebuild the team because the team is built. Even in 2027, Debo's under contract, McCaffrey's under contract. George Kittle's contract will void then. He'll maybe be a little older, but you still have Nick Bosa under contract, Fred Warner under contract, Javon Hargrave under contract. Like, you have everybody, you still have your core together all the way to 2026. 3 years from now, you'll still have that core together. This is the 49ers. And I think when we look at like who's got the most cap space and all that stuff, we think about that as who has the best future. But the team with the best future is the one that already has the players under contract that will be there. So even if this year isn't it, maybe this isn't the year that they stay healthy. Maybe next year is the year that they stay healthy. The easy answer to this is the 49ers are a contender if they stay healthy. You have to put that qualifier on it.
Of course.
And that's just because of the track records of the players that they rely on. But then on the other hand, I see the future is in place, but boy, you're never going to get the infusion of talent that you need if this does end up falling short. You will be very stuck in it, because now is the time when all of the draft picks that they gave up for Trey Lance should be coming of age. Everybody's got, Kyle Hamilton that was that year, right? Kyle Hamilton was the year after the Lance trade over in Baltimore. He's coming into his own as an all-pro safe. Those are the kinds of impacts that you're starting to see. Guys are going into year 3 with it, right? And the 49ers won't get that because they decimated so much of their draft stock trading for for McCaffrey and for Trey Lance and all that stuff, and not getting anything out of Trey Lance. This is when those chickens come home to roost. They didn't hurt him before, so they really are very all in on this build, and they won't have a lot of flexibility to adjust this build if, say, injuries continue to mount, or if somebody regresses and you just don't get the same stuff out of them, or if George Kittle decides, I'm old, I'm hanging it up, right? Which will happen someday. Or if Brock Purdy takes a step back next year, now you need a quarterback. Well, what are you going to do about it? Now we've got a problem.
Yeah.
So they're kind of on eggshells.
And Luke, you think about the flexibility too of if they do eventually give a contract extension to Brock Purdy, that makes it even more difficult. I just don't know. And you're right, they're locked up long term. But when you think about Deebo Samuel, Nick Bosa, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, I do wonder how this team is going to age over the next few years. And if they don't have that infusion of talent,
they will age.
And that's the thing. And if eventually you need Purdy, it goes back to the quarterback for me. Like if they need Purdy to do more, I do wonder like what his ceiling still is. And again, with Shanahan, it's always going to be easier. Like Shanahan is an elite play caller, but sometimes him being such a good play caller, I think can get in the way, and it makes decisions like this possible where they're contemplating letting a player of this caliber, Brandon Aiyuk, walk out the door.
Yeah, and I think that would go a long way because Brandon Aiyuk, whatever the next chapter of the 49ers is incredibly unclear and might get kind of dark. Whenever this is over, and I'm talking, 4 or 5 years from now, right? Like 49ers fans right now, you do not need to worry about this. But looking deep into the future, what they will have after this is going to probably need to be rebuilt from scratch. So you got to get a ring off of this, right? This is the window. You are in like as clear of a window and I don't even really believe in windows, but I feel like that I have to call this one.
Yeah. That's the other thing, Luke, is like, it's not measurable, and this is a team that hasn't let one Super Bowl loss. Like there's a lot of teams that when they suffer that one heartbreaking loss in the conference finals in the Super Bowl, they just don't bounce back. And this team has time after time, but you do wonder like how many shots does this team get? And now they lose a player like this. Again, it's not measurable, and it's just a gut feeling. But it's like, are they going to keep getting back? I don't know. I mean, it feels like their best shots have been there. But you're right. I mean, in the next 2-3 years, they're not going to suddenly just collapse either.
It's hard to get to the Super Bowl, right? I think they have 3 more years. I think looking at who they have under contract through 2026, it seems like the plan is this is the build through 2026, and then we're going to do void years. We're going to do cap shenanigans. We're going to get under the cap. We're going to basically Saints this for, and Eagles love to do this too. And so do the Vikings. We're going to kick the can down the road. And in 2027, all the chickens come home to roost. We all get smacked in the face. And hopefully we have a couple of rings to show for it. That seems like it. So I put on, if you're watching on YouTube, I put on the little sidebar, is the 49ers window closing? As with all things, that it will come to an end someday. But I do still kind of think, like when the floor falls out, it'll fall out hard, but I don't think that that's imminent. I guess that's where I'm at.
No, I agree. And I don't know. I think the 49ers, they're still going to be a top tier team this year. Like I'm definitely saying that. Sure. Yeah. But you remove Brandon Aiyuk, they don't feel as unstoppable. Like last year, as somebody that covers the Philadelphia Eagles, when they played the Eagles, I'm like, oh, this team is clearly on another level. And the Eagles at that point were 10, 11-2. Without Aiyuk, like I like Ricky Parasol coming in as a first round rookie, but this team has a lot of talent. I think they definitely step back and it opens things up in this conference. Whereas with Aiyuk, they're still clearly the favorite, and there's a gap.
Speaking of clear favorites with gaps between them, the Steelers QB competition has perhaps taken a turn. We will get to that as well as the rest of our yikes and likes of the week on Locked On NFL.
And today's episode of the Locked On NFL podcast is brought to you by BetterHelp. Look, when your schedule is packed with kids' activities, big work projects, and more, it's easy to let your priorities slip. Trust me, I know going to therapy through football season, it's not easy. Even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. If you're thinking of starting therapy, make sure to give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Doesn't matter if you're working the 9 to 5, the graveyard shift, BetterHelp is flexible in that way. Just fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist. If that doesn't work and you want a new therapist, you can switch at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today. You're going to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/lockedon for 10% off your first month of online therapy.
Keeping it rolling here with the Locked On NFL podcast. Louis, welcome to Tuesdays on Locked On NFL. What we do on Tuesdays is yike and like of the week. That is something that we liked and something that made us say yike. So why don't you give me to start something that you liked this week?
Yeah, and we've already mentioned the Pittsburgh Steelers today as a potential candidate to land Brandon Aiyuk if he is traded from the San Francisco 49ers. My like of the week is Arthur Smith, the Steelers' new offensive coordinator, talking up Justin Fields and mentioning how he just brings a different dynamic to this unit. And that makes perfect sense that Pittsburgh's noticing this now as training camp rolls through. It was always a head scratcher. First off, their entire strategy of bringing in Russell Wilson and Justin Fields felt strange, but what was even stranger was that Russell Wilson was being talked about almost like unanimously as QB1, and it wasn't a completely open battle. Mike Tomlin has made the comments that, like, when it's time to compete, Justin Fields will compete. But what Russell Wilson has done the last few years to earn this, like, unquestionable starting role over a Justin Fields makes no sense. And I did wonder once it came time for the pads to go on, if that tone would change. And it does feel like it is. And I think for Pittsburgh, it makes so much sense for a win now window to start Justin Fields. For the talent they have this year, his mobility can raise that floor, but also long term, like, you give Fields a shot this year, see if he can be that guy that meets that first round potential. And if not, you move forward. But the delaying the inevitable with Russell Wilson starting, I don't know. He's not good enough to be such an upgrade where they're suddenly from a wild card team to a Super Bowl contender. So you might as well start the young guy who's equally as good, if not better, and has a higher floor. If you want to keep going 9-8, like it seems like they want to do forever. For me, Justin Fields has always made more sense as the Steelers quarterback. And of course, it's just one comment, but I liked that Fields got a boost of confidence from his OC.
Yeah, I was definitely in the camp of, like, he's not getting the job. I watched this dude in Chicago, adjacent to my team for 3 years. He ain't getting that job.
Watch
but
Russell Wilson in Denver. It's like, and that's a
maybe
lost
the
cause
problem.
at this point.
Maybe the problem was just Chicago. Maybe that's a place that poisons quarterbacks where they go to die. Good luck, Caleb. I'm going to go negative first. Actually, no, I'll save that for last. I'll go with my like as well first. There was every year we get a bunch of these videos of training camp brawls. I love it. Oh my, the joint practice. It's not a joint practice if you don't get swung on by somebody. There's got to be a little bit of a brawl. It's the dog days of summer. It's hot. You've been going against each other all summer long. You've been every single day. You finally get to go against someone else. It gets a little too intense. I love it. It reminds me how much these guys care. And I think about these moments, you're in practice and you're getting so heated that you're fighting, right? And it reminds me of when it's week 17, week 18, and anybody who's eliminated is going, well, why don't we just lose for a draft pick? You got to remember this is the mentality of somebody that's going to start a fight with a dude in a helmet on a 95-degree day because we all went that hard in practice. These are the people. It reminds me of the kinds of people that we're covering, the intensity. I revere it. I love it. It's awesome. I don't care that some people clutch their pearls over it. Get over it. These are warriors.
Daniel Jones getting into a fight today, by the way, was great.
Heck
and
yeah.
how much of that is just
quarterbacks getting into it?
Oh,
yes.
And you know it's pure frustration. The embarrassment he's dealt with all offseason with Hard Knocks, the Giants trying to trade up for a quarterback. To me, that was him just letting out some frustration and getting into that skirmish. I love it, though, because quarterbacks are so protected in camp that he just, on his own will, went into that pile. But that was funny. Definitely Daniel Jones letting off some steam, and I don't think it had to do as much about that Lions player. Had more to do about his own team.
Yeah. Amon-Ra St. Brown getting into it as well.
It's great. It's the best.
Love it. I love it, and I love every time I see it. What about something that made you say, yike?
Yeah, and this one's more in the weeds, some sicko Eagles takes, but Quinyon Mitchell.
Good. That's what we want.
Yeah.
Sicko. Is there any other kind of Eagles take?
No, absolutely not. Everybody knows that listens to Locked On Eagles. I've been a Quinyon Mitchell guy pretty much since before the Senior Bowl. Was so glad the Eagles ended up getting him in the first round. Thought he would be like the unquestioned starter opposite Darius Slay this year on the boundary. But he has been playing as the first-team slot with Cooper DeJean down. Keely Ringo and Isaiah Rodgers have been getting the majority of first-team reps opposite Slay. And Vic Fangio said that he likes Quinyon Mitchell on the inside. For me, this is yikes because not that Quinyon's not playing well inside. He really is. But you did not draft him on day one to be a slot cornerback. And, of course, like he's got to earn it. He is a rookie. Just because he starts in the slot doesn't mean he'll be the slot corner long-term. He'll be an outside guy. But based on his competition, who he's going up against, Keely Ringo and Isaiah Rodgers, young players in their own right with a lot of upside. But for them to be like the unquestioned guys getting the majority of the reps over Quinyon on the outside does drive me a little bit nuts. And I hope he eventually, as the preseason goes on, does get more of a 50-50 share with those guys on the boundary. So again, in the weeds, Eagle stuff, but their first round corner, I need him on the outside to propel this team into the future.
Locked On Fantasy Football for more about the prospects of Quinyon Mitchell.
IDP, baby. IDP leagues.
My yike of the week. So the Broncos have been on the list all year. All right. The Broncos have been on the list. They have been just like deeply unserious for the Nathaniel Hackett, Russell Wilson thing was a disaster. They're still climbing out of it. Now they expect us all to believe in Bo Nix. And here's the mark of an unserious team. You reveal the sickest throwbacks back to the days of Elway, the days of the AFL. They even look like these throwbacks. These Denver throwbacks rock. I don't know how I feel about the rest of their uni kit, but I love the throwbacks.
They're egregious. The other two jerseys are egregious.
It's, when they do the Auburn, like the white helmet with the like blue and they look like Auburn, I don't think it works. I think there's combinations that can work in there. I'm lukewarm on it, but when you have these throwbacks and then you're like, we're going to bust them out week 18 against the Chiefs. Are starters going to play that game? Like Mahomes is not playing in that game. Are you going to be mathematically eliminated? This is going to be a noon game, noon central, a noon game that nobody watches except for like weird fantasy tiebreakers in leagues that haven't moved the championship up. And you're wearing your throwbacks for that? Like, do it on a game that people are going to watch.
They might be tanking in that game at that point. If they even have to tank to get the first overall pick. But I totally agree.
You're going to be 5-11 by then. You're going to have like 9 people in the stands. And that's when you're bringing out your throwbacks.
Well, Luke,
that is the lamest thing I've ever seen.
Well, apparently, according to Sean Payton, Bo Nix is the next Drew Brees, and he said it 1,000 times. So are you sure they're not going to be competing with the Chiefs for the North, for the West?
for the AFC West? We'll see if someone does that for the first time in 9 years. What an unreal run. And the AFC West is getting a little bit, I say this a lot I said this a lot about the Tom Brady AFC East, right? The Jets, the Bills,
I grew up
the
in
Dolphins.
Buffalo. It is the New England Patriots early Tom Brady years.
Where nobody gets to last for more than 4 years because you don't really get to keep a head coaching job for 4 years if you haven't won the division, and nobody could win the division because Brady was in it. Mm-hmm. Feels like the Broncos are in there. The Raiders are in the pits a little bit. The Chargers are the last ones to die. They're the holdouts. Good for them. But, we'll see if that is meaningful football at all, but you got to bust out your throwbacks in a bigger moment, I think.
Totally agree. Those are the one jerseys, by the way, Luke, the redesigns that they've been so good for the last 2 years. Denver feels like they're going back to like what Jacksonville and Tampa did and that gradient weird era of NFL
Jacksonville
unis.
Gradient helmet. I think Jacksonville should wear it as a throwback once.
I think eventually
once ever.
Look, nostalgia sells. Give it 10
Yeah.
years, people will be calling for.
We remember this
the
awful
Rolo
cringe
helmets.
thing we did once.
They'll call it the Blake Bortles uniform.
Yeah, the Blake Bortles is like
Yep.
give me the Seahawks in that like weird action green with the blue sleeves.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I love it. When teams are ugly once, it's my favorite.
It'll make
But this,
Thursday night football fun. Just do ugly.
Exactly.
Ugly
It's
jerseys
got to be a Thursday night game.
Yeah, it's got
against like the Titans.
Yeah.
Louis, thank you so much. Everydayers, thank you so much for hanging out. This is Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.